You know what you shouldn't say in French? Something like Bonjour mon ami, comment allez-vous aujourd'hui? It's correct French, but it's a bit too formal for most occasions. In everyday life, it would sound weird to your Parisian friends. Instead, you can use a simple Bonjour, ça va? Or even Coucou, ça roule? It's a bit informal. It's not the best grammar, but suddenly you sound relaxed and friendlier. Today, I'm going to show you why speaking bad French is actually the secret to sounding native. You see, there is a version of French that you probably saw in school, in novels and textbooks and newspapers. And it's the French you need to get good grades in your exams. That's why I call it correct French. And then there's the actual French that we speak in everyday life. And I'm sorry to say, but they're almost two different languages. So, do you need to throw away everything you've learned? No, but you need to take the official grammar rules with a grain of salt and navigate between levels of French depending on whom you're talking to. For instance, you learned about saying bonjour. That's a really important greeting in France to start any conversation, especially with strangers like a store clerk.
Mademoiselle, bonjour. Une pain au chocolat.
But of course, in casual settings, we more often use the casual salut.
Salut Tata!
Or simply the cute coucou. Coucou, ça va? Quoi de neuf? If you want to start a more personal conversation, you can then ask how they're doing. Maybe you've learned to ask comment allez-vous? Comment allez-vous? That would be correct French, but very formal. We would use it to show respect with a polite distance. But in real life, that's a question we mostly ask our friends. And that's where we would use a more relaxed spoken French, like ça va? Ça va? Or a bit more informal, ça roule? Ça roule? Coucou, ça va? Quoi de neuf?
Ça roule!
There's a lot more greetings in informal French, and I'm not going to cover all of them right now. When in doubt, you can stick to the ones that you learned in school. The issue isn't that bonjour is wrong, it's absolutely okay. It's that there is a whole toolkit that you can use to sound more relaxed and informal with your friends. This is just the beginning of understanding how French really works. Have you ever had that moment where you're watching a French movie and you can read the subtitles perfectly, but what they say sounds completely different? Yes, that might be informal pronunciation, and that's how French people talk in everyday life. So you've learned je ne sais pas, but they actually say je sais pas. They're cutting the ne here. Because in spoken French, we almost always drop the ne in negations. Even when talking to a stranger, even when we're being polite. In real life, it often sounds like je sais pas for je sais pas, je sais pas, je sais pas. We wouldn't write it that way, but that's how it sounds. Letters get pushed together.
Je vois pas, je sais pas ce que tu fais.
The same thing happens with, for example, il n'y a pas de problème. There's no problem. Il n'y a pas de problème. In real everyday French, we would pronounce it like y a pas de problème. Y a pas de problème. The negative N here disappears and we cut letters when we can. If you pronounced all the letters here, it would sound weird and a bit too formal. Il n'y a pas de problème becomes y a pas de problème, or simply pas de problème. Pas de problème. And that's much shorter. And without the ne, grammar is a bit easier now. Just like with asking questions, spoken French makes that simpler as well. Maybe you remember long lessons in school about the grammar of French questions. You know, like asking qu'est-ce que tu fais ce soir? What do you do tonight? Or even que fais-tu ce soir? This is more formal still. You'd be using the special pronouns and switching the places of verb and subject and using est-ce que and all that. Well, in real, friendly, everyday spoken French, we would simply ask tu fais quoi ce soir? Tu fais quoi ce soir? When you're watching a French movie like Intouchable or Amélie, that's the kind of thing to which you can pay attention to. So you can train your ear to bridge the gap between the formal French that you've learned and the spoken French that we use in real life. But pronunciation is just a part of the picture. In everyday conversation, French people also use different vocabulary altogether. Think of it like this. You learned formal French vocabulary, but need conversational French vocabulary. You learned la voiture, perfect, but we also use une caisse. You learned le travail, but you might also hear le boulot or le taf. Le boulot or le taf. You learned l'argent, but in movies sometimes they say le fric, les thunes, or even les sous.
Ton mec c'est le prince charmant et il est pété de thunes en plus.
And there's a lot more French synonyms for this one. So let's see how informal French can change a real conversation. Correct written French would be comment vas-tu aujourd'hui? Est-ce que tout va bien? And the answer would be oui, tout va bien. Je suis pleine d'énergie. Or plus ou moins, je ne sais pas, je suis un peu fatiguée. Okay, this is correct French. Everyone understands you, and that's the most important thing. Okay, you learned this at school, and that's good. However, you do speak like a manual for learning French, like a textbook. Real informal spoken French would sound like ça roule? Ouais, super, j'ai la patate. Or, bof, je sais pas, je suis un peu crevée. That's informal French. Everyone understands you and your speech is more natural to a French person. And it's fun to say bof, 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 bof. It sounds funny and it feels like you're speaking like a French native. Now, I want to mention something subtle here. Correct written French is not exactly the same as polite spoken French. For instance, here's a question in correct formal written French. Avez-vous des projets pour cette fin de semaine? Do you have anything planned for this weekend? This is correct written French, but will always sound overly formal. First, you don't need to use la fin de semaine. Le weekend with the French pronunciation is perfectly acceptable in all cases. Second, and more importantly, the inversion of the subject and the verb, like that, is never really used in spoken French, even when you're being polite. So even when you're talking to a stranger, like your hairdresser in France, you would ask, vous avez des projets pour ce weekend? That's polite French with vous. It's not informal, but we still use spoken French grammar rules. Vous avez des projets pour ce weekend? That's perfect, polite and nice. Meanwhile, with friends, we would use tu. And you could ask, tu fais quoi ce week-end? T'as des trucs de prévu? Tu fais quoi ce week-end? T'as des trucs de prévu? What are you doing this weekend? Do you have anything planned? Un truc is an informal word for quelque chose, something. And to be clear, always use polite French when you're talking to someone doing their job, like a help desk to a police officer or when you're buying clothes in your favorite Parisian store. That's when we use vous instead of tu and we stick to non-slang vocabulary. We often keep the spoken French grammar and contractions though. Okay, I can see the gears turning in your head. This is exciting, right? Navigating these levels of formality is the final step to true fluency. It requires something like a map. And that's exactly what I've designed for you. My weekly practice plan is your personal roadmap. It helps you understand exactly where you are on your journey, and it gives you the specific tools and focus areas for your level. It will give you the confidence to know when to stick to bonjour and when you can throw in a carrément to really connect with people. It will force you to build a clear step-by-step plan to finally understand movies, participate in conversations, and feel the joy of connecting with the language, not just conjugating it. Get it for free at the first link in the description. It's the smartest way to use your new bad French skills perfectly. And if you don't think you need it, let me tell you my story. I learned this the hard way when I moved to the UK for my first job as an engineer. I spoke English pretty well based on my exam results. Textbook English, I mean. I had solid grammar, lots of vocabulary to write essays, and you know what happened? People thought I was, a bit too formal, slightly weird. It wasn't until I started using more casual expressions and cultural references that I finally sounded natural. Textbook English was one thing, but real life English was a different universe. The same principle applies to French learners. I have students who've been studying for 20 years, and the moment they start using these natural patterns while keeping their good foundation, French people finally connect with them. The goal isn't to speak incorrectly, it's to speak appropriately for the situation. Here's exactly how to bridge from textbook French to natural French. First, master the casual greetings. You can use bonjour in all situations, that's absolutely fine. But with friends, you can also try salut or coucou. Next, cut the ne in negations. Go from je ne sais pas to je sais pas. From ce n'est pas vrai to c'est pas vrai. C'est pas vrai! Then adapt your question style. Use que faites-vous, what are you doing, with this inversion of subject and verb that you learned at school, in formal writing only. Keep qu'est-ce que vous faites with the vous for polite conversations. Use tu fais quoi for friendly conversations with friends. After that, learn natural contractions. Practice the common patterns. From je sais pas, go to je sais pas or je sais pas. Il y a or il n'y a pas become y a or y a pas. Tu es and tu as become, can you guess? T'es and ta. That's really, really good. Another example more complex. Tu n'as pas besoin de te presser, il y a le temps. Actually sounds like t'as pas besoin de te presser, y a le temps. Don't use them in writing though. After that, build conversational vocabulary. Learn the informal versions of common words. This will help you at least to understand spoken French. Like le travail, learn that it is also le boulot and le taf. Une voiture can also be une caisse. Quelque chose can also be un truc. You don't need to use them yourself if you don't feel like it, but you need them to understand informal conversations around you and in movies as well. After that, train your ear with real French. Listen to French YouTubers, podcasts, casual conversations. Notice the signs of spoken grammar and vocabulary, the ones that we mentioned. And also their differences with correct written French that you learned at school. What else would you add to the list? And remember, you're not abandoning everything you learned. You're adding a new skill set to what you already know. That's fantastic. Think of it as becoming bilingual within French itself. Now, don't forget about your personalized weekly practice plan. In the next lesson, we will do a listen and repeat exercise, and I'm sure you will have lots of fun. À très vite, see you there.